Hello and welcome to our ninth session, and in this session we are going to discuss about the armatures. Now what is this armatures? To understand this, let us come into Blender and we have the default application open. I will select this cube, press X and I will delete it. Numpad 1 and come into the front view and the cursor is exactly at the center. Now I will press Shift A and now we are going to deal with this armatures. So when I click on armature, you are going to see a structure like a bone added into our scene. So basically this consists of three parts. One is a ball at the bottom, one ball at the top, and a linking pyramid like structure. If you come into the outliner, you are going to see this armature, and if you open it, inside that you will have one pose and another armature, and when you open this, we have the default bone. This is the first bone that we have created. Now if you come into your properties, now you have two properties. In the data you are seeing the posed data, and then you have one bone property present for this, and in the bone property I can give it any name. For the example, I will call this as first bone. I will press shift middle mouse and move it to bottom left like this. Then I will have to come into edit mode. I can select one tip of this bone, and if you press E on your keyboard, a new bone will be created. See, now a new bone has created, and I am going to press Z and move it straight like this, and I am going to call this as the second bone. These bones has forward kinematics applied to it. Forward kinematics means, say for example, if I press tab and come into object mode, to operate these bones or to create any animations, we come into the pose mode. So when we are using armature, we will have this pose mode active, and when we select the pose mode, now when I select the bottom bone and if I rotate or if I press G and move, you can see that both these bones are moving, but if I select only this and press R, only this is going to rotate. Now you may ask, this is similar to parent-child relationship. Why do we need armature? We can achieve this with parent-child, but this has a feature called as forward kinematic and invert kinematics. To understand this, say I will come over back to edit mode and I will select this, and again I will press E and I am going to add one more bone, and I am going to call this as third bone, and after this I will just zoom out and I will again press E, move forward, and now I am going to add the fourth bone. This we will call it as the fourth bone. Now as of now, this is applied with forward kinematics. Forward kinematics means if I come into pose mode, when I select the first bone and when I press R and rotate it, see all other three bones moves. I will right click and cancel it, but if I select the second bone and if I move it, all the bones which are the child of this are affected, whereas the bone at the parent bone is not affected. Similarly, if I select this and move it, see only this bone is going to move, and similarly if I select the child bone, only this bone will move. This we call it as forward kinematics. Forward kinematics means move a parent, the children will be affected, but when you move the children, parents will not be affected. Whereas in case of armature, we can apply another kind of kinematics which we call as inverse kinematics. So now to understand inverse kinematics, I have selected this armature. I am now going to come into edit mode and I am going to select this fourth bone. If you want to know the names of the bones here, I can come into this pose data and I will come into viewport display and enable names so that you can see the names here. Now selecting the fourth bone, this time I am not going to press E and extrude it, but I will press Shift plus D and duplicate and create one more bone here. Now when I have created this duplicate bone, this bone is still the child of the third bone. You can see the line running here, or if you come into the outliner and if you open this armature first bone, I open second bone, then in third bone you can see both fourth bone and fourth bone 001 are child here. I will select this, come into this bone data, and I am going to call this as control bone. The first thing I will do is I will select this and I am going to press Alt P and I am going to clear the parent so that this is no more the parent. So see, the control bone and first bone are both the part of this armature. I will come back here to pose mode. Then I will select this control bone. With shift press select this fourth bone. I will come into pose and you have inverse kinematics and I am going to click on add IK to bone. And when I click on this add IK to bone and if I click on to active bone, then immediately you can now see how this structure is moving. So now this control bone is going to control this bone in inverse direction. If I select and move any one of the bone, I will select this control bone, press G, and if I move it, see how this is going to affect all other bones. So as I am moving it, you can see the other bones are rotating and moving along with this, and this is what we call as inverse kinematics. First going to come here, file, and I am going to click save as, and I am going to call this as 11 IK underscore bone, and I am going to save this. So after saving this file, I also want you to create an IK bone structure like this and submit it as an assignment. Now next thing is come back to file here, new, and we are going to create a new file, and this time I will select this cube, press X and delete it, press numpad 1, come into the front view, press shift A, come to mesh and add a cone. Now for this cone I will open this add cone, adjust parameters, and here I will basically rotate it along the X axis by 180 degree and then move it along the Z axis by 1 meter. I am going to come over here and I am going to call this as chain holder, and for the mesh I will call it as mesh chain holder. I will come back to this scene area, press shift A, and now I am going to add a torus. Now for this torus along the X I am going to rotate it by 90 degree and then I will move it along the Z axis by 1 plus 0.25, that is minus 1.25, so that it comes and sits exactly below this cone. Now after adding this, I am going to call this as link 1, and for this mesh I am going to call this as mesh underscore link. I am going to select, press Alt D and duplicate it, press Z, I am going to move it along the Z axis by minus 1.3, and in this I will again reset it to around minus 1.5, so that this is sitting exactly over the other torus, and then I will press R and along the Z axis rotate it by 90 degree. So these two now appears like a chain, and I am going to call this as link 2. Since I have pressed Alt plus D, both link 1 and link 2 will have the same object data. Now I am going to select the first link. With shift pressed I will select the second link, and then I am going to press Alt D again, press Z and move it down like this, and in this distance I am going to set it to minus 3 meters. Now I am going to again press shift R to repeat it once again. I will press shift R once again and I will repeat it. So now what happened is, if I just press shift middle mouse and I will move it to the side here, I am going to name this. Say for example, this is link 1, I am going to call this link 2, this will be called as link 3, and then the other one will be link 4. Then I will select the other one here and I am going to call this as link 5, and this will be I will name this as link 6. Then I will select this and I am going to name this as link 7, and finally I will call this as link 8. Now I am going to come over here. Now say for example here we want to create the animation of a chain swinging from left to right in different shapes, in different rotations. This is where armature comes into the picture. I will now press Shift A and I will come here and I will add the armature, and I am going to call this armature as chain armature. And if you open this chain armature, inside this you have one pose and then you have one armature, and if you open this armature you have a default bone. And to see this bone, if you come into the wireframe mode, you can see the armature added here. So right now I will select this armature. I am in object mode. I will press rotate, and along the y axis rotate it by 180 degree. And now I want this to stick to the top to this line. So for this, what I will do is I will press G, Z and I will move it to the top, and I want it to be exactly at this point. See, this has to be at this point. So I will just zoom it in. I will press GZ and match it and place it here. Now to precisely place this correctly, what we can do is I will select this, come into edit mode, and then you have one option called as snapping. Now in the snapping, I am going to enable vertex and I am going to enable snapping. I can enable snapping either here or I can use the keyboard shortcut control. So now in the edit mode, I am going to select this bottom part and then press G, Z and move it down, and I will press Control and snap it to this vertex. See, this is correctly snapped here, and I am going to call this bone folder bone. Then I will just press Shift and I will move down, and with this selected, I will press E and I am going to create one more bone, and I will press Control and I will just snap it to this center here, and I am going to call this second bone as link bone 1. I will just press 3, come into the side view and see that this is correctly aligned. I will again come back to first view, and now in the next bone, when I want to create, I am not going to press E and I am not going to extrude it, because my next chain is not starting from here, it is starting from this point. So I want my next bone to be aligned from here. Press 1 and come, and I will select this bone, link bone 1. Then I am now going to press Shift plus D to duplicate it, press Z and move it down and just snap it to this point. And once I snap it, I will move it to the side and see that this is correctly aligned. Both in numpad 3 view and numpad 1 view, it should be correctly aligned, and I am going to call this as link bone 2. Now again I am going to press Shift D, press Z and move it down, and again press Control and snap it to the grid at this point, at the bottom point here, and press 3 and see that it is correctly moved and snapped, and I am going to call this now as link bone 3. Now I am going to repeat this. I will again press Shift D, press Z, move it down, and I am going to snap it to this point. I will again press GZ, move it and correctly snap it to the point here. I will rotate and see this is correctly snapped and applied. So I am going to now call this as link bone 4. Now I will press 1, come into the front view. I will again press Shift D, Z, move it down and press Control and snap it to this point. I am going to now call this as link bone 5. Now I can just rotate and see that it is correctly aligned. Then I will again press 1, press Shift D, press Z, move it down and snap it with Control pressed, snap it to this point here, and I am going to now, I will name this as link bone 6. Then I will just press 3 and see that it is correctly aligned. Then I will again press Shift D, I will press Z, move it down and align it to this bottom here. I am going to now call this as link bone 7, and finally I am going to press Shift D, press Z, move it and snap it down, see that is correctly aligned, and I am going to call this last one as link bone 8. I will press 1 and come into the front view, and now if I come into the pose mode and select this and move it, see nothing is happening. The reason why nothing is happening is all these are added but they are not parented. See, this all these are parented, only this you can see the line only to that holder bone. I will right click and cancel it. Now again I will come back to edit mode and I will select first bone 8, and to see the bone numbers I will come into this pose in properties, and in viewport display I am going to enable names so that you can see the names here. I will select bone 8, link bone 8, shift and select the link bone 7. See that this yellow border is there to indicate this is the active bone. Now press Ctrl P and make parent with keep offset. Choose the option keep offset. Now same thing, I will select 7 and I am going to select the 6th bone. See that 6th bone is active. Press Ctrl P and make it parent and keep offset. Again now I will select the 6th one, press shift and select link bone 5, Ctrl P and make this the parent. Now I will select link bone 5 and I will press shift and I will select link bone 4. See that this is active, press Ctrl P and enable keep offset. Now I will select link bone 4 with shift press select link bone 3. See that it is active, Ctrl P keep offset. Then I will select link bone 3, press shift and select link bone 2, press Ctrl P and click keep offset. And finally I will select link bone 2 with shift press select link bone 1, press Ctrl P and keep offset. So now what has happened is all these are child of one another. If you come into the hierarchical structure here, I will bring the mouse over here, press Alt and space bar and I will make it big. So I will select this, right click and I am going to come to view and choose expand all or press shift A. You can now see the structure here. You have holder bone, link bone 1, link bone 2. Each of this component is the child of another. And now I am going to press Ctrl space bar, come back here, and now in this case you can now see that this bone is added. But if I come to pose mode and if I try to make any movement of this bone, nothing is going to happen because see only the bone is moving but the chain is not moving. Our next job is to link our object to this armature. I will select all these parts here, shift A to collapse everything so that everything is collapsed. I will open this and now you have the links. Come into the object mode and first I am going to select this chain holder, and then with shift press I will select this armature and then come into pose mode and I will select this bone. Press Ctrl P and click on bone, parent this part. So now if I press G and move, along with the armature, the chain holder object is also moving. I will right click and cancel it. Now again I will come back to object mode here and I am going to now select this link 1. Then I will shift and click on this armature, then come into pose mode and select the second bone now. You need not click shift again, just select the second bone, press Ctrl P and choose bone. So now if I press G and move it, see now you can see this link 1 is connected to the link bone 1. Now next I am going to come back to object mode. This we are going to repeat it. I will select link 2, then shift select and select the armature, come into pose mode and click on this link bone 2, press Ctrl P and choose bone. Now come back to object mode, then select link 3, come shift click armature, now come into pose mode and select this link 3 here and then press Ctrl P and link the bone. Similarly, now I will come back to object mode, select link 4, then shift click on armature, come back to object pose mode here and click on this bone, Ctrl P and choose bone. And now I will come back to object mode and I am going to select this link 5, then shift click on armature, then come back to pose mode and select this link bone 5, press Ctrl P and choose bone. Now I will again come back to object mode, select link 6, then shift click on armature, then again come back to pose mode, select this link bone 6 here, press Ctrl P and set parent to bone. Now come back to object mode and select this link 7, then shift click on armature, come back to pose mode. Now select this link 7 bone, press Ctrl P and set parent to bone. And finally come back to object mode and select the link 8, then shift press on armature, then go back to pose mode, select this bone now, press Ctrl P and set it to bone. So now we have attached each link to each bone. So with this done, I will press 1 and come into the front view, and if I come into shaded view, I will select the armature here, chain armature, then I will come over here and come into pose mode. I will enable X-ray here so that I can see the bones. If I press G and move this, see only this bone is moving. Okay. Now if I select a bone here, that is link bone 3, and if I rotate it, see all the bones below it are rotating. So right now this is applied with forward kinematics. However, I want to create an animation of this chain swinging from here to here. So now in forward kinematics, you can see it is very difficult to create this kind of animation. And this is where we are going to make use of inverse kinematics. Select the chain armature, come here into edit mode, and I will come into wireframe mode, and I am now going to come into this view here, and I will temporarily switch off all the mesh objects so that I can see only the bones. Now I will select the link bone 8, again I will press shift D, I will press Z and move it down, and I am going to create a new bone here, and I am going to call this bone as control bone. Now I am going to come into the pose mode. So right now you can now see both this link bone 8 and control bone are the child of link bone 7. Now I will select this, and with shift click I will select link bone 8, and with link bone 8 being the active selection, I am now going to press shift I or come into pose inverse kinematic, and if I click on add IK to bone to active bone, now if I select this and if I move it, you can see how these bones are moving and how these bones are behaving. Now let us come over here to the selectability and visibility and enable mesh now. Right now selecting this control bone now, and if I press G and move it, now you can see how the control is or how the chain is moving. However, now one thing you can observe here is as I am moving this control bone, you can see the top holder is also moving. I doesn't want this inverse kinematics to affect my top holder. Then I can place it somewhere here, then select this bone where we have applied the IK, and when you select it, you can see an yellow line coming from here to the end or the starting of our bone structure. I want this to start from here. So, for that I will come into my settings, and here you have one bone constraint, and when you have selected your active bone to which we have applied the IK, you have one option here called as the chain length, which is set to 0. Now 0 means it will go to the starting point of your chain. Now if I press 1, you can now see only the first bone will be affected, 2 only 2 bones will be affected, only 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and for 8 you can see it is getting applied to the point below this holder bone, and this is what we want. So I can set the chain length to 8, and now if I come to this control bone and if I move this control bone, see, you can see how I can move it without disturbing the holder bone. So I will press 1, come into the front pose, try to move it and adjust it. So this is what we call it as the armature kinematics and inverse kinematics. So this is just an introduction to how we can use armature in Blender, and this entire process we call it as rigging, and we will have detailed class later how we can use rigging to animate a person walking or a bird flying. So all these kind of organic animations is created using armature and rigging. So right now come to File and go to Save As, and in your folder name this as 12_chain.ik and save this. I want you to complete this assignment and submit it. And after this, in our next session, we are going to have a look at other features like adding the image, empty and force field. So let us meet in our next session. Thank you.